Colleagues, on we go with our technical session. The next speaker will be from Vasily Belov, Director General, Skolkovo Ventures. Please welcome Vasily. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. Afternoon session is always a challenge both for the speaker and for the audience. Well, in terms of investments, maybe money is not as exciting as technologies, but I'll do my best to make sure that you'll see interesting slides. Part of my slides explains what's happening with the investment opportunities in cyber security world. And I hope we'll come to interesting conclusions. And also, I'm sure to save 5 to 10 minutes for your questions and my answers. I'll start with figures, classical things. If you look at this slide, these statistics, well, not everything is clear with the Asian market. What is happening in China, for instance, in Chinese cybersecurity, not everything is included in and shown in analytical reports. This is why figures may be somewhat even bigger, but not by times. Investments in cybersecurity seems to be really a fast-growing venture market. So the very market is also growing very expediently, and the growing number of threats, of course, produces impact. If you look at venture investments, we'll understand how complicated this segment is, and of course, not just Kleiner, Axel, and all those companies shown on this slide participate. These are just the biggest. The average growth rate is 25%. Look at the left-hand part of the slide. And Russian venture market is somewhat close to 350-400 million US. Well, it is quite a lot. Now, as for drivers in the market, which sectors in the market are of interest? Big data, of course, is important, as important as artificial intelligence, and so this is, you see the trend and what's happening. The artificial intelligence, of course, is in fashion now, and it's a great hint. I think everything is in line with the global trends, and your investors are sure to like it. It's the same with big data and in AI and cybersecurity in general. So I talked to my colleagues trying to define specific segments, which segments are of specific interest. As a matter of fact, the trend is such that biggest money, biggest investments go to everything related to cloud solutions, security of mobile applications. This is something very easy to understand for cybersecurity investors. Everything what deals with mobile applications is easy to understand, because all that obviously needs protection. Another segment is infrastructure. It is very important in connection with the Internet of Things. Here you can see two examples. So these are the company which managed to achieve great results. CloudStrike on the left-hand side. So they reached the IPO level in 2019, and it would be nice to have a similar multiplicator in venture market. So multiplicator was 26 in their case, and mind you, that was quite a big company, and 6+ billion EV sales multiple at the IPO. The second player was bit modest, but still the result is quite impressive. So if you look around, you are unlikely to see anything similar in terms of M&A. It means that investors do believe in the market, and investors will keep on investing. If you look in the middle of the slides, sorry, cannot show you. You see the logos of investors, 6 rounds and 7 rounds of investments, all the way to exit. 6 years, 7 rounds of investments from various funds, and in first case, investors has achieved a 10x result, and the second case was 10x result, which is both quite successful, quite interesting. And of course, corporations heat up the market, and investors display interest because Cisco, Intel, and other major players show a great corporate VC portion. So they started investing at early stages when the companies were up to 10 millions, and then all the way to successful M&A. Now they count roughly for 1/3 of the market, and this is not just venture contracts, but also M&A, and the Russian market can only envy this story, listening to this story. And even though we're talking about quite a difficult technology-based segment, still look at what's happening at M&A market. Have a look at the right-hand part. Light blue shows the portion of deals by non-strategic buyers. So various participants, various players, financial institutes, banks play an important role, and the attention paid by the Sberbank is a good example. Financial institutes, very much like Sberbank, will also account for this light blue part in the diagram. They invest quite a lot using various instruments, including M&A. 23 billion, all in all, was the volume of M&A market. Now, speaking about strategies, they buy not just company already made up, but they start working with startups. We may take accelerators dealing with fresh innovation. Cisco accounts for 6 projects. They have several funds, 5 private deals, 50 all in all. The overall amount, 2 billion plus, and M&A, when Cisco procured the company, so it was 10 billion plus. So M&A is a sort of a result. But if you look at the preliminary corporate P and VC investment and accelerators, it is of interest that investments in early startups account for roughly 50% of the entire Cisco R&D budget. So they have a very balanced strategy. This slide shows good examples of what Cisco did. CloudLock, M&A example, and Open DNS and Duo. Cisco took part in 3. No, they took part only in 1 round. They used the Cisco Venture Fund, and then Cisco acquired it.
What interesting conclusion could we draw from that? If you build a company you would like to sell to a strategist, drawing investment from him is a good idea, a good opportunity to get on his radar for follow-on business sale. It's important not to do it too early, because in all success stories, CVC did not come in the first, second, or third round, but closer to the end. It was either the last round before M&A or right after that. Because when such a strategist steps in, even at the level of transaction with a private VC, he gets fairly many shareholder rights to agree the follow-on round, also participation in the board of directors meetings, and it automatically cuts off a sizable class of other investors. And with the Melka company less attractive for other strategists, or probably harder for purchase. So another strategist would have to bargain with the inbuilt strategist, the one who had entered in through his CVC corporate earlier. Then he certainly enjoys more information. Therefore, we certainly should get on the radar of corporates and strategists, but we should take money from them only when you become aware that you'll be sold to this particular strategist. And this sale is in the outlook of several years, but not hypothetically once upon a time. Now a couple of words about our Russian market. Unfortunately, we do not have sizable statistics right now. The evaluations are rather modest, but anyway, some venture transactions do take place. The market is not that transparent. A sizable part of it does not get on the pitch book or the global fund monitors. There are some foundations who invest into this area, but there are few. Yet we are a bit optimistic that the strategists are now turning to this market. For now, unfortunately, we cannot see any transaction with interesting multipliers. What we hear informally from potential purchasers, those who could be recognized as strategists in Russia, but realistically, you can buy a company for 60, 70 million US for the whole company, and it's harder to pay more here. Therefore, there could be several investment strategies, and this is the general trend that we witness in some other sectors with high-tech companies. It's like a polarization of the Russian venture market. While as recent as 5 years ago, a company had mixed strategies to get hold of some share in the domestic market with international sales. We'll see how it will go on here. We'll select and combine things. Currently, I think the black and white emphasis in cybersecurity will be made, I guess, and the companies will have to make choice in clear whether you are a Russian or a foreign company. It will be tough to work with major or mid-sized customers internationally. Clearly, it's geopolitics. And the perception of mass media that we had, the media coverage that we had with regard to U.S. elections and so on, we help some companies, not as investors, but as advisors, to set up tenders. Right now, we feel that 95% of the international foundations, as soon as they hear that a certain company is engaged in cybersecurity in Russia, they just put the receiver on the rack, telephone receiver on the rack, and the picture becomes black and white. Either you invest, you adjust your strategy to the Russian market, you partner with local major companies. A more manageable thing. Many people trust it, and they are ready to invest for this growth strategy. But you should understand that the economic model you sell to investors is capped, has a cap of 50, 70 million US at most in case of a successful sale to Sberbank or Rostelecom or the big three of telephone, mobile telephone operators. We can extend this list, but the sum of exits will be plus minus the same. I believe that for some individual entrepreneurs, it's not a bad story, and the timeline can be shorter due to the size, company size. You can sell yourselves with about 10 million turnover and get 5 multiplier if you have a good EBITDA. Or it is there at all. It's quite realistic. And even these revenues are product-related, and it's a big difference. Companies with product-related revenues, they're not in consulting, not integration. They will always enjoy a multiplier several-fold higher. This slide is about the domestic market growth. It has less relation to the investment component. It's rather more about the dynamics that we witness in the market and how it would progress, what growth drivers there will be, and the infrastructure protection. You can see it on the right-hand side. We discuss here the domestic market, a company building and selling it in 5 years for 40 to 50, 60 million US. The number of cyber threats, attacks, This black and white picture, the current polarization of the closed domestic market and the national market, it will be increased. It will create some additional demand domestically, but will be restricted by this potential opportunity. In principle, I will not advertise Skolkovo for long what we do in cybersecurity. I'll just bring up some numbers. As I sense it, more than 50% of the tax residents, or other residents here, you can see here, they do have some relation to Skolkovo, either residents or do something together with us. Cybersecurity for Skolkovo is clearly in top 10 priorities for our foresight. It's not that sizable right now, but these are 70 companies now in this subject area of the total 2,000 residents in Skolkovo. About 4,000 jobs, 4,000 people employed by these companies. It's not many, and it reflects certainly the current status of the market. I'd like to remind you, yes, we have some grant programs, both micro, mid-size, and macro grants from hundreds to 10,000 US. We also hold some events, activities. So the Skolkovo Cyber Day, the Skolkovo competition. The Skolkovo companies are fairly proactive. Some of those have international ambitions, and so on. I would suggest to complete it with the slides for now. We could probably do some Q&A. You are welcome, please, for a question. I'd like to ask you in English. It's easier for me. I'd like to put a question in English.
So I'm coming from the perspective of someone who consults for foreign investors in Russia in the IT sector. And you were saying that foreign investors who hear about investment opportunities in the cybersecurity sector in Russia, they run away. Well, there is a rational element to it and an irrational element to it. And so if you were in my shoes and you had to convince those investors to invest in those really cool guys who have a great product in Russia, what would you say to them to sort of help them, or, you know, make it more rational?
I will also address your question in English for convenience. Actually, the good news is that most of the things with which they run away are more perception-based. So they are not kind of business logic-based, but they are perception-based. That all Russian IT specialists are hackers, and all cybersecurity specialists are hackers, definitely. So I think this is something which you can deal with if you choose to work in this particular sector. There are several fundamental things which makes Russian cybersecurity technologies attractive, and which are quite obvious if you look in the global companies, even those which has nothing to do with Russia, US-based companies which raise funding or go public, if you open the page in their PowerPoint presentation teasers, I would say that you can argue in how many, but indefinitely more than you would expect on the pages with the team composition, you would find people with the Russian look-like names. So it means that Russians are quite professional in this. So the technologies that we have here, they definitely might be competitive on the global market. And that's your arbitrage, which you can sell to the foreign investors, meaning that now market is constrained and the valuations are very attractive compared to to the valuations in Silicon Valley. The same company in terms of the product readiness level and business numbers like revenues, headcounts, or anything else. Here you can invest with a valuation 5 times, 10 times less, and you can negotiate on the good terms. But then you would definitely need to be a professional investor in this area. It's a very specific area to invest. You're not gonna make money if you're a generalist and you invest in everything which has IT in its name and its title. You should have a deep expertise in that, and that's probably your role with this dialogue. And then having foreign investors will definitely make a cap table more attractive for the follow-on investors. So it's another good story how your investment in this company grow by itself. So it's
Excellent. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Да, позвольте тоже задам вопрос.
I would also put a question. It's rather similar to the previous question. What individual technology lines, product lines in cybersecurity you could single out, those who are more or less subject to the polarization trend we are seeing here? We are the IB, a common resident group. Despite all these current trend, they are progressing quite well globally. Interpol collaborates with them as well, and there are some others. They suffer here currently. More details, please? You know, as for general cybersecurity companies who operate internationally, there are so few. It's hard to sample those by segments and confirm a certain statement about them. As for general considerations, I believe the more a certain technology relates to deep tech and critical infrastructure protection, or such sensitive things as personal data, impact on public opinion and so on, the higher will be the alertness of investors. Also, when I say that the investors are being polarized, being divided into those who operate outside Russia as well, there are also exceptions from this trend. Those who can find this formula, this equation, they get higher returns on investment because they enjoy their competitive edge. I mean, the design development costs in Russia and the hard currency revenue that they earn abroad. Now, revisiting, well, it's hard to answer. And it's contingent strongly on which investor you mean. For the VC investors, venture capital investors, it will be more sensitive. They are not that highly motivated to a certain technology. They are generally financial investors, and they incur some political risks. And when they use other investors' money, there are many LPs for whom goodwill matters, media coverage. It will be hard to work with them. The corporate VCs, they are less subject to such things. They manage only one company's money. They don't have any problem with fundraising for their funds. They are more keen on the technology itself. If you have a high-class technology in some super sensitive segment, it's interesting to a strategy. I think corporate VC could connive, could close their eyes at many things. But anyway, the matter is how they will integrate later with some company. And these follow-on steps should be suggested to the company to localize, move in here. And it also result to the same bifurcations. Hello, I'd like to specify the question further. I saw on your slides Skolkovo residents, including InfoWatch, Beast, Hanovets. These companies can hardly be called startups. As with alarm and crater companies, it's clear. Could you mention 3 or 4 real startup companies with a real-life product on hand, not with artificial intellect in PowerPoint, but some initial sales are already done. How do you think of that? The statement, what is a startup?
The question, where does a startup start? In my understanding, startup is not a bad word. If you think that someone get offended when it is called startup, well, I cannot agree with that. I wouldn't like to define specific names or specific cases. We are not as specialized investors. In Russia, we do not have a single player for whom cybersecurity is the top priority investment segment. Though cybersecurity, of course, is of interest to all. Maybe partially, this answers your question about possibility to invest. Colleagues, I understand we have run out of time. I would like to thank you all for your questions, and I hope it was of interest.